What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday, and today we are going to be comparing the Fanstoys Apache with the Transbots Virtuous, whatever it is. The two springers, am I right? I believe we compared the Fanstoys with the MMC, and I believe the MMC won, and I think that's probably rightfully so. Kind of overall as a presentation for a figure. My guess is, I see it's hard with this. Like, I like to preview something. Like, the thing is, Transbots is going to win certain categories. I just know it. Accessories, gimmicks, price. Like, there's just some things that are going to come out, like, just off brick. So I think it's going to be really close. But I think Fanstoys might have them. That's just my prediction. But we are going to kind of get right into it. I don't have any housekeeping. I do have to say, or take a moment rather, and thank Joel W., Robert D., a lot of people that have been sending me stuff recently, Scott M., Rockstar Adam, because it's been a dry spell for me. So we would have had nothing on the channel at all. So I do appreciate it. I know some of the repaints and stuff and some of the Hasbro stuff isn't as exciting, but maybe we can use that information for further discussions that could be exciting. I have something fresh next week, at least one thing, maybe multiple. Been a lot of good stuff on the Patreon recently, a lot of G.I. Joe Classified stuff, got some Star Wars Black Series stuff, some 3-0 stuff coming, but the kind of Transformers world has been a little dry recently, but it's starting to get back up. I've also been dusting recently, so forgive any disarray that you may see. It is coming together quite nicely though, and I do have some collection focused tours coming very soon on the channel. 80s cartoon shelves, and I think my DC 112 scale stuff. But I've done all of this side so far, and I still got this side left to do. Always something, I suppose. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into this, and you know where we have to start.
And we'll start with accessories, and as usual, Transbots is going to take the accessories category. The Fanstoys comes with a couple things, the gun, the sword, obviously, but the Transbots just gives you a ton of faces, an IDW-styled head, the sword, 2 guns, one for each of you, flight stand, propeller that looks like it's spinning, blast effects, the little avatar figure, like it's just, there's really no comparison. The Transbots, I mean, the Transbots' strength, in my opinion, is their accessories. Like, they always knock accessories out of the box, or out of the park. I was just looking at the box, which is why it messed me up. As for gimmicks, Transbots has the 4-arm blasters. I can't even remember if Fanstoys has them or not, but Fanstoys certainly doesn't have the light-up effects for the headlights, which Transbots does have, so once again, another win for Transbots. Moving on to build and materials. It's tricky, so I'm gonna give the materials a tie. They both use good plastics, they both use die cast, they both use ratchets, so I'm gonna tie them out there. I don't think there's a clear winner there, but the build, I have to give to Fanstoys. There's some kind of like wobbliness to the Transbots that the Fanstoys doesn't really have. And as a result, it's just objectively a fair point for Fanstoys in that regard. And then moving into hardware, once again, it goes to Fanstoys. They both have ratchets in the hips, but Fanstoys are spaced better. Soft ratchets in the knees for the XTB, hard ratchets in the knees for Fanstoys, hard ratchets in the shoulders. It just overall utilizes more hardware and more hardware appropriately. So 2 points for Fanstoys here and 1 tie. Moving on to sculpt and paint. It's funny because the arms on the Fanstoys are disproportionately large. I also don't feel like there's clear enough definition between chest and torso on the Transbots. So I think there's enough kind of weirdness about both in that regard to tie them out from an overall presentation of sculpt. I also think that they're both painted, and for the most part painted well, with the exception of the paint on the diecast of the Transbots. So once again, I'm gonna tie them out. Moving on to the front look of the head, I prefer the Fanstoys. I like that the yellow is painted on the diamond, or triangle rather, on the forehead, and I love the sculpted line work from the angles of the eyes down to the cheekbones, down to the face. I think it creates a more distinctive facial look than what the Transbots does, which is they just simply carved it out. And while I think it's still effective, I don't think it looks as good. Paint-wise, they tie. Sculpt-wise, it's going to Fanstoys from the frontal view. From the side, I don't think there's a clear and present winner. They both look very, very similar, and the differences, I think, are marginal. For the torso, once again, I think the Fanstoys wins. I think the Fanstoys has a clearer defined chest, a clearer defined abdomen, whereas the Transbots kind of looks like one singular mass. I prefer the little translucent piece of plastic. I think it adds for a different look and a different breakup. Even the carved square line down the middle of the chest, I think adds something to it. I just think the Transbots is too plain in that regard, but I think they're both painted equally as well. From the side, I think it's pretty much a tie. I ultimately prefer the Fanstoys once again because of the chest, but I've already kind of given them that point on the front, so I think it's pretty much a tie. I don't think there's a clear winner here. They both have those massive backpacks and both kind of sacrifice a lot of visual kind of cues, hoping that the arms will cover it up and such, and I think that both of them are right in that regard. The arms, proportionally, I think the X-Transbots look better. I think the length of the bicep, along with the more appropriate size shoulder pads, proportionate forearms, I think it all works a lot better on the X-Transbots. From the side, pretty much the same bag here. It comes down to proportions. It comes down, and when I say proportions, I mean both in proportion to itself as an arm and also in proportion to the bot as a whole. I just think that X-Transbots does it better. Sculpt and paint-wise, neither of them kind of take the edge over the other. Really, it's just how it ultimately looks in regard to the bot and to itself. As for the pelvis, I actually think the X-Transbots takes it. In spite of that awkward square in the middle of it, I think that overall it looks more cohesive, it looks more purposeful, it looks more like a pelvis and less like shapes that make up a pelvis. I think it does a better job. From the side, pretty much the same thing. I think it looks more purposeful, it looks more like a anatomic body part rather than just components that are there to kind of fill a space. As for the legs, I think that Fanstoys has a better thigh. It doesn't have those kind of gaps in seams. There is obviously a seam in the Fanstoys. It's just not as noticeable, both at the thigh swivel and at the two pieces of plastic that form up the thigh. It's a marginal difference, to be fair, but I think Fanstoys is ultimately better. For the lower leg, I think X-Transbots is better. It's cleaner, it's more cohesive, and it seems like more of a purposeful shape. Once again, kind of harkening back to the same thing with the pelvis. From the side, I think the thighs are pretty much the same thing, and I think ultimately go to Fanstoys. The lower legs, I think, are actually more of a tie. There's things that I like about the Fanstoys. I like a lot of the sculpted detail. I like a lot of the bump out pieces. I do recognize that the X-Transbots is cleaner, and I'm gonna ultimately give the point to X-Transbots because it doesn't have the kind of green pieces that wrap around from the side, but I think the side view of the leg is a much more marginal difference than the front view. And I think from the back, it's very, very, very marginal. The differences are just so minute. There's things I like about both, there's things I don't like about both, but I think that it's ultimately such a small bit of difference. Honestly, this has been one of the most gratifying sculpt and paint sort of sequences that I've ever done, because I do kind of feel like they are equal and they do certain things really well and they kind of do the opposite things from one another really well. And it ultimately ties them out for kind of being genuinely or generally as good as the other from the front and back. But Fanstoys takes the head and torso, X-Transbots takes the arms and hips, and they both kind of split the difference on the legs. And I think that's probably pretty accurate objectively. Let's move on to articulation. So the Fanstoys is on a hinge swivel. You get up to there, you get a little bit down, you get a swivel. The X-Transbots pretty much acts the same way. You get a little bit up, you get more down, and you get the swivel, and you can even get it cocked off to the side a bit, so to speak. So all of that creates more articulation for the head for X-Transbots. Fanstoy shoulder gets you up to 90 degrees on a ratcheted joint and 360 around with no real butterfly joint. You get a slight one actually forward, and you do get a reverse one slightly. So there is actually a butterfly built in there, pardon me. The X-Transbots, you get out to 90 degrees and you get 360 around. And then if you untab it, you also get a butterfly joint forward, but not backward, but you do get a wider range forward. The bicep swivel for the Fanstoys is above the elbow, but it still works. More of a proper bicep swivel for the X-Transbots. Single hinged elbow for slightly more than 90 degrees. Double hinged elbow for the full run. Wrist swivel with the fingers individually articulated at a primary and secondary knuckle, and the thumb also on a primary ball peg with a secondary hinge. Same thing for the X-Transbots, except you also get a tertiary hinge at all of the fingers. Ratcheted waist swivel with ab crunch, and even a little bit of a teapot. Ratcheted universals for hips that get you out for the full Van Damme, pretty much. Forward and back to there. Ratcheted hips for the full Van Damme for the X-Transbots. Forward and back to there. Double jointed knee for the full run. Single jointed knee for 90 degrees. Slight ankle tilt up, ankle tilt down, and a rocker at the toe, which is just as effective. Full ankle tilt up, more of a slight ankle tilt down, and a rocker as well. This shouldn't come to anybody as any real surprise. This was during the era where Fanstoys was definitely slacking in articulation, and as a result, they only take two categories. They take the shoulders, I don't know how, but they did it, and they also take the knees, which was slightly impressive as well, given the bulk of the leg. X-Transbots takes the head, elbow, hands, torso, and hips, and they tie at bicep, wrist, thighs, and ankles. So this is a X-Transbot smash right here. Transformation wise, we'll start with car to helicopter. And honestly, unfortunately for Fanstoys, this was during the era where Fanstoys sort of relied on this whole method of having this armature of moving pieces. There was a lot of figures that they did during this time that kind of operated the same way. You would remove or disconnect one armature, and off of that armature would be 1,000 things on pins. And you'd have to sort of fight and struggle and manipulate them around in order to get them into the right way. Unfortunately, while it was effective, it wasn't fun, smooth, or enjoyable really in any regard, whereas X-Transbots from car to helicopter specifically is smart, fun, enjoyable, intuitive, natural, flowing, and easily repeatable. Moving on to helicopter to robot, X-Transbots unfortunately struggles a bit more here. In a couple places, getting the head through the chest, getting the arms out of the chest, causing paint damage to the shoulders, and Fanstoys once again relies on these swinging armatures and all sorts of issues regarding tolerances and poorly moving pieces and so forth. So I don't think that either of these are necessarily successful, but X-Transbots will take the point because of their alt mode to alt mode transformation. I've said it once and I'll say it before, Springer's alt modes are really suggestive and they vary so much in the cartoon from piece to piece. So I'm going to try to be as objective here as possible. I always thought and still do that the Fanstoys car mode was just a bit too long. It seemed like a stretch limo version of the Springer alt mode. Whereas I think the X-Transbots is more compact and more purposeful and looks more like the car, even though I don't think either of them really nail it. I think the X-Transbots is closer ultimately. The helicopter is a different beast. I think that the front end of the helicopter looks a little awkward on the Fanstoys and looks a little bit better on the X-Transbots. But I think the rear end of the helicopter, while maybe not cartoon accurate, looks more like a working futuristic helicopter to me. And I don't think the front of the Fanstoys looks horrible in the same breath. So I actually think that I might prefer their helicopter mode over the X-Transbots, but I don't think either of them really knocked the other one really out of the market. I think that you could give one a point for being more accurate, but we have a cartoon accurate category. So I'm going to give Fanstoys the point here and tie them both out for alt mode. Moving on to scale, I'm going to tie them out. They're pretty much the same size, but neither one of them scale quite appropriately if we use the figures that we kind of have available. Obviously, this is a Fanstoys figure, so that can be up for debate as to whether or not that's even a scale, rather, but we have one official offering on my collection, and neither of them are tall enough to scale properly with Ultra Magnus. It's hard to find. The scale chart kind of shows RC's head coming up to the bottom of the bicep, or the top of the bicep rather, which is the same space for pretty much both of them, except that he has a lower shoulder than he does. So it's like, size-wise, it's still there, but the arm isn't quite right. So it's like, neither one of them are quite right. They're both very, very similar in size, so I don't know any other way but to tie them out here. Cartoon accuracy-wise, I think the point has to go to X-Transbots. This is where him not having an abdomen comes into play. The lower legs are definitely much closer to the cartoon model for the X-Transbots. The proportions of the arms are much closer. And the shoulder pads, while not perfect for either, are even closer on the X-Transbots. It just does a better job of capturing the cartoon model, if that's something that you're into. I can't remember what the original price was for Apache, but he is currently $220, and the X-Transbots comes in at $200. It's a $20 point for X-Transbots. They take it there. All right, which one do you think looks better?
I think I like this one.
All right, and then which one do you think feels better?
Ooh. So I know I think that this will feel sloppy to me.
I agree.
He's not gonna stand there. So this one.
All right, Jana, which one do you think looks better?
This one.
Okay, and do you want to pick them up?
Cheese and crackers. Is there leg weights in that?
In both.
Oh, this one has the not very smooth joints. This one has smoother joints. That one feels better.
Okay.
Except for the legs. Don't like those.
I agree. All right, which one do you think looks better?
That one.
This one over here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and pick them up. Which one feels better?
That one.
All right, baby, which one do you think looks better?
This one.
Okay. Do you want to touch them a little bit?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
I like this one.
You like this one better?
Yes.
Okay. So X-Transbots takes the accessories and gimmicks because it is ultimately what they are best at, in my opinion. It also takes articulation because this came during the Fanstoys era where they thought articulation wasn't all that important. They are getting better, which is nice to see. The transformation goes to X-Transbots 2 because by some grace of God, they have a pretty smooth transformation here, especially in comparison. The X-Transbots also takes price and tune accuracy. The Fanstoys takes the build, it takes the hardware, because it is better built and kind of better put together, just overall. It also takes the paint because it doesn't have the same issues that the X-Transbots does, which is somewhat ironic because Fanstoys is kind of known for having some chipping here and there. And then the presence category kind of is what it is. You know, the kids and the wife call it like they see it. They tie in materials because they both use pretty good materials. They tie in sculpt because I think they both look good. They're just trying to do different things. They tie in scale because neither of them get it quite right, but both are kind of close enough. And they tie in alt modes because I think one does one better than the other.
For a total score of 6-3 X-Transbots. I'll be honest with you, I thought that Fanstoys was going to take the presence category, but they tied it out, you know, the will of the family, but God bless, like, this is not how I score these figures at all, personally, but, you know, the objective points are the objective points. It's just you have to weigh them personally as to what matters to you. So, I was dead wrong. I guess that's what I get for guessing, right? I've never won a 50-50 in my life, and this is no exception. And I think that it's ultimately fair. There's a lot of stuff that, like, I don't think the Fanstoys is necessarily trying to do. I don't think it's trying to be cartoon accurate. I don't think this Springer was designed when they were trying to be so G1 cartoon accurate. The alt modes have always been a little weaker. The transformation was during kind of their worst era of transformations. So the X-Transbots just has a number of things going for it. Am I switching out? Absolutely not. I don't like the super toy accurate stuff more than I like the kind of more physically intimidating looking stuff, so I'm perfectly happy with my choice. I was thinking about doing a discussion video later on in the future about, like, when the smoke has settled on a lot of these wars, like the Springer Wars, the RC Wars, like the Sea Spray Wars, like, how do I feel, the Trailbreaker, how do I feel about it, you know, in hindsight? If you guys would be interested in that, let me know. I think I'm going to do that, though. For those that are 4Dummies fans, you should also know that 4Dummies hosted Nerd Rage Radio this week. Desperate times call for desperate measures, but I do appreciate Robert D. and Jisk and my wife for stepping up and kind of helping me with that. Nerd Rage has been a bit of a bear this month to schedule, and next month might be a little challenging too, but it should get a bit easier. And with that, I'll be back on Monday with a little locomotion for you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.